Welcome, collectors. Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights here. Got an episode that I haven't heard people talking about as a set or as a product, and I don't have a co-host today. I'm just going to give you my experiences with something that started out not being rare at all, and now is really pretty tough, especially tough in well-centered, great condition. So it's 6162 Fleer basketball cards. And in case you're wondering, when the reason there's a hyphenated year for hockey and basketball is because the seasons span crossover into the year. They're late fall and winter and spring sports. And each one of those has greatly expanded their season as the playoffs are much longer than they used to be. But thanks, sponsors, Panini, Topps, Upper Deck, Burbank Sports Cards, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Heritage Auctions, Huggins Scott Auctions, as well as ComC, Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So not including the card companies, all the other sponsors would be delighted to stumble on some 6162 Fleer basketball cards. It's just, it's a set that, you know, when I'm doing these podcasts, I'm self-revealing that it snuck up on me. And I didn't miss it in one sense, but in another sense I did. And I'll try to explain my thinking along the way. 1961 was my biggest year in collecting when I was a kid. I was 12 years old, and you'll find, and Rich and I batted this around. I mean, the 12-year-old year of collecting is for many the apex of their kid collecting journey or story. A lot of times you start at 7 or 8 years old. Being able to read is helpful. and then, 12 is the year right before 13, which is, symbolically and literally teenage years, which is, there's a little bit of a breakaway there too for many people. Also, 61 Topps is the year I decided to put initials on the back of my cards in a ballpoint pen, just so everybody would know that they were JB, in case I don't know what I was thinking, but not smart. Don't do it. So 61, I had a lot of cards. A lot of my buddies collected. It was great, but we moved in the summer of 61 across town, not way across town. We moved less than 5 miles, but it did involve a change of schools. And I had some similar friends, but a bunch of new friends too. So I was going from 6th to 7th grade, which in this case was junior high or middle school or whatever it was called in those days. So in fact, I don't remember a lot of collecting activity at the junior high for 62 Topps. I remember seeing the cards. I mean, they're distinctive in the wood grain, but for baseball, didn't really see them that much. And I don't know, just like I said, it wasn't grade school anymore. So, and I definitely remember the 62 Fleer basketball. After all this, I was living in West Virginia. I was in Wheeling, and West Virginia was basketball crazy. Jerry West had graduated just a few years before, and he was just could do no wrong, and was already started off he had great NCAA success and was just a terrific pro. I mean, he's the logo. So I already did an episode on that. So most of my buddies that I was growing up with and hanging out with were good athletes. And I don't remember many of them playing organized Little League baseball or Pony League or whatever it was moving into then. Although we did play a lot of sandlot, kind of choose up games. So we played a lot of baseball. But mostly we played pickup basketball. And I just remember, I was the new kid, a little bit of a late bloomer, kind of short for my age at that time, but I loved to play. And I was not a good shooter. And somehow I used that to my advantage because I was a good defender and a really good passer. And I understood court spacing and knew how to make my teammates look good. So I was a good teammate and frequently on the winning team. Actually, I also knew how to choose good teammates too. So my buddies were my two best friends were two of the very best guys. So we did well. So I remember Fleer's sets that came out late 50s, early 60s that were baseball, the Ted Williams set, the all-time great sets that were the Hall of Famers in the 2 years of that. And I do remember the Fleer basketball. My sense is they had to come out in late 61 or early 62, probably very late 61. The season wasn't as long then, and I'm not sure the product was very successful. Fleer was still doing the all-time greats. My sense is they did all-time greats again in 62 with just the second series of the 61 set. And then 63, they did the 66 card baseball set. So they were doing these smaller sets, but clearly on the basketball, it had to be so unsuccessful in terms of sales that not only did Fleer not continue, but Topps didn't even bother to imitate them. You have to know that if Fleer had been successful in 61, 62, then Topps wouldn't have waited until 69 to do the tall boys with the Lou Alcindor rookie, and just, they were capitalists. They would like to make money, and baseball cards were really hot in those days. Football, way less so. Basketball, apparently, even way less so from football. And that was probably true of the sport too. Except in this town where we lived, basketball was our main sport in those grades. And there's an unusual stigma. I don't know that it applies perfectly to today, but it certainly was reasonable back in the day, is that the Fleer basketball set was too easy back in the day. If you bought one wax box, which I only had one friend that had that kind of money, which would have been, it just blows me away. That was probably $1.20. But, we were dealing with coins, and he had some paper money. So, but it was too easy. If you bought a box, you could basically get 2 complete sets. And that's kind of a bad thing if you have a collecting mindset and you're after the chase. Well, there's no chase. You just spend the money, you get it. And it was not like a factory set, but it just was. As a kid, I was conditioned, and the neighborhood kids were conditioned that cards came out over series, and you had to try to complete this series before the next one came out. And they were pretty exhaustive of a bunch of players on every team, and you'd have some players you really already knew and some you didn't. Well, now along comes 61, 62 Fleer basketball set. There's only 44 guys in the set. I know there's 66 cards, but the first 44 are the regular cards of the players, and the other 22 are repeat in-action poses of pretty much the better players of the first 44, and they're alphabetized by player name. But then you realize there were only 9 teams in the NBA in those days, and one of them was an expansion team. So when you realize that the Celtics were winning all those titles, they didn't have to beat 29 other teams. They didn't have to beat they were beating 7 other teams, and 8 in the case of the 61-62 season. So the Celtics were dominant, and I'll mention that, but there were 7 Celtics in this set out of the 44 players. So extremely overrepresented. You think, well, that's not fair. Well, wait a minute. All 7 of them are basketball Hall of Famers. And then another of the 4 of the 22 in-action cards were Celtics as well. So 1/6 of the set is one team. But again, that one team was one of the dominant teams of any sport for that dynasty. I remember back in the day when the in-action cards, when you got them out of pack, they weren't as good. My problem is I actually got them when they came out and didn't appreciate them because they weren't baseball. And so I'm sure I traded them for baseball cards at that time, and any that I still had left over for the next time I came back into the hobby, which was a few years later. I just didn't appreciate, I certainly didn't appreciate the in-action cards, and I would have appreciated Wilt. I would have appreciated Jerry West, Oscar Robertson, Elgin Baylor. I followed basketball enough to know that those rookie cards were amazing, but rookie cards weren't a thing. Now, Walt Bellamy, underappreciated guy in some sense, was the rookie of the year that year, which points out that how can he be in the set if he hadn't played a game the year before, which was not the custom in those days. So I'm wondering, again, they must have had a group licensing arrangement. And so I'm wondering if Walt Bellamy and Tom Meschery, was the other guy that was kind of a touted rookie, but that maybe this set, the season began on October 19th. It's possible that this set was not released until December, let's say, at which time, with such a small set, Fleer could put together the art and be able to include 2 guys that had never played. And again, they're not, well, so it makes me wonder if the set wasn't released a little bit later in the year in order to incorporate Walt Bellamy and Tom Meschery and all that. So the Celtics were the champs. If you had to guess who won the NBA title in any of those years, you would just think, well, of course it was the Celtics. But what you wouldn't know unless you were there, and I wasn't following it that closely, but just a little bit of research points out the Celtics did not have a cakewalk. They were, again, the 7 Hall of Famers, in the set. In their conference, in the Eastern Conference, whatever it was, the finals there, they beat Wilt in Game 7. This is Wilt Chamberlain and his Warriors team by only 2 points. That's barely nipping it out in the last. And then when they went to play the Lakers in the finals, there's Elgin Baylor and Jerry West, and they again took 7 games and won by 3 points in overtime. So the Celtics won those titles, and what's amazing is that and I know from just playing a lot of sports, is that there are a lot of games in sports that come up to the last quarter, the last minute, the last whatever. And it's amazing how many times the better player wins when it gets down to the nitty gritty. So they really came through. The set did not have good quality control, off-centered, missed cuts, but not appreciably worse than 61 Topps baseball or football. I mean, this was Fleer. By the way, there was Topps hockey. I don't remember seeing Topps hockey. We weren't really in a hockey place. So let's see. There are some interesting choices they made for who did not get in the inaction set. Al Attles, they didn't know he was going to go on to be a pro. Walt Bellamy, as I said, was a rookie. Bob Boozer, father of Carlos. Carl Braun went on to be an executive. Wayne Embry, same thing. Hal Greer, outstanding Hall of Famer that shot his free throws with a jump shot. Casey and Sam Jones, who were kind of biding their time. When they got their time, they made the best of it and won a bunch more championships. Hot Rod Hundley, who was a great announcer and was a great college player and a good pro, but didn't get it. Bob Slick Leonard, he's again coaching fame. Willie Knowles was a great player. I don't know why they didn't pick him. And then Lenny Wilkins, again, went on to kind of a crafty lefty guard that went on to show that he really understood the game to be a great coach. Lastly, what happened to my 61-62 Fleer basketball set? I traded it along with some other stuff for a 57 Topps baseball set. And this was in the 70s. I don't know why. I just thought this is a little dinky basketball set. I could easily get another one. And 57 Topps set has excellent trading currency because it was again, as Rich has pointed out, and John Clemens, and I've got another episode with Jonathan Flemister, people really like the 57 Topps set. So I thought, well, I'll get another 57 Topps set instead of having this little tiny 61-62 Fleer basketball set and this other stuff that I don't care about. So what did I do with the 57 Topps set? Well, I don't know. I don't have it anymore. I traded. I can think of a bunch of trades now that I made of 57 Topps sets, after I got this one. And I thought, well, and I never had more than two at one time, but I would get them. And I think, well, I could always get another one because the semi-high numbers were never that tough for me to put together. So I could put together a 57 Topps set. I wound up trading one of the, let's see, I had I'll do this in another episode. I had a 65 Topps presentation set, which a few of you might know what that is. It's basically a hand collated set from like Cy Berger that every card is like a 10. And again, this is in the 70s. I traded it for a 57 Topps set because 65 was so recent. This might have been 75 or 76. And then but that's even worse. I had a 58, 58 Hires root beer set or 57, 58, wherever it is with the tabs. And I traded it for another 57 Topps set. Again, I wasn't accumulating them, but I just always wanted to have an extra one. I can't remember what I traded any of these 57 Topps sets for. I just remember accumulating them. I don't remember really selling them. And again, the joke is my favorite set is 56 Topps, not 57 Topps. And I guess I always thought that 57 Topps would be an appealing set, and it was. But, you fast forward, I've got one set. That's it. So I wish I had a bunch of them because they're great cards with a lot of really good stuff. Very clean design. So that's it for 61-62 Fleer basketball. A great iconic set, but so great. Why didn't they repeat and bring it forward? So basketball is now coming on very strong, and that's part of the legacy of why. So it's great to have. And again, those 4 rookie cards were amazing. So I want to do over on my trade. So talk to you again. Be safe, be healthy, and have fun with collecting.